Hello everybody! Today we are going to talk about the materials found in chapter 6 of your book, Musical Texture and Form. Let's define what musical texture is. If we think about the word texture, that refers to the thickness of something, right? In music, it refers to how many musical lines, being voices or instruments, are heard at the same time during a piece of music, during a performance. The idea behind it is that we can combine how many instruments are present as a composer. I don't always have to write music that is for 15 or 20 instruments at the same time. Sometimes, perhaps, I want to write music that features a single instrument, an unaccompanied instrument, a single musical line. And for that, it means that I'm changing the texture of that particular piece. So we have specific definitions for each instances where one instrument appears or a group of instrument appears, and we also have specific definitions of how these particular lines relate to one another. Do they work together? Do they work in contrast with one another? Are they pitted against one another? So that's what creates the musical texture. The first example of the texture that we are going to talk about is monophony. Now, monophony happens when a single musical line is taking place and nothing else. So if I was to play this particular piece for you, what you have heard is a melody played by a single instrument with no accompaniment, with no harmony, and that's an example of monophony. Now, homophony is the next example that we are going to talk about, and that happens when multiple lines are involved. So more than one line. We could have two, we could have three, we could have four, whichever. And they move from a pitch to another one at the same time. So homophony is going to involve a chord, and we talked about the chords last time, right? When more than one pitch is played at the same time. So let's see, I'm going to play 4 pitches for you in one chord. So these are 4 different pitches. I'm going to play the chord. Now, here's an example of homophony. One more time. So what we have heard is more than one pitch played at the same time. However, when the pitches moved, the chord moved to another chord. There was no line that went against that. Every line moved at the same time to some other pitch. So a chord moved from a different chord, moved from a different chord. What this happens is, this particular example is homophony, because we have more than one particular line, but the lines they work together. They don't go against one another, okay? So that's the difference between monophony and homophony. Now, the next example, which is actually the most interesting, is polyphony. The polyphony happens when 2 or more lines move at various times. In a sense, they are pitted against one another. So let's take a look at an example of polyphony. What we have is we have a line that enters by itself, but then another line will join. However, they're not going to work together. They're going to work at various times. So, in a sense, it's an example of a canon. The canon is the simplest example of polyphony. Take a listen to this. Here's the first line. Here's the second line. So on and so forth. So again, one more time. The second line enters by itself. Now the second line would join. And the song will continue this way. But what we have is we have the second line that's always going to be behind the first line, right? So they're not working together. It's not homophony where every line, every chord moves from one pitch to another at the same time. Pitches happen at different times. So in this particular case, polyphony is taking place. And then a very specific type of polyphony is counterpoint. And counterpoint happens when voices of the same importance are opposed to one another. Sometimes in polyphony, you're going to have voices that are less important that happen at the same time. Counterpoint is a very specific type of polyphony. Really, I don't necessarily need you to remember this particular term. Just kind of know it exists. But if you remember polyphony, that's pretty much my goal for this particular case. So let's move on, since we are done with the texture, and talk about musical form. So what is musical form? The musical form refers to the fact that in music we have section of pieces that are arranged in a certain manner. So when I have a piece of music, sometimes I'm going to have the same material appearing more than once, right? Think about a poem, and a poem might have a line or two lines of that particular poem that happens more than once in order to emphasize the fact that those particular lines are really important. It's the same thing with music. If I have a material that I really want my audience to understand and grasp the fact that that material is really important, as a composer, I'm going to feature that material more than once. So that's the idea of a repetition. I repeat the material more than once in order to show my audience that, hey, you need to remember this material, it's really important. Contrast is also part of the musical form because I can have contrasting sections of a piece. For example, if I have a fast part of a piece followed by a slow part of the piece. Let me give you an example. So here's a piece of music that features two sections. The first section is fast. Now the second section is going to be slower because I want some contrast between the two. So okay, let me play it one more time without talking, and I want you guys to try to hear the difference, the relationship between the fast section and the slower section. Here we go. So the first section was a lot busier, right? It seemed faster. It featured a lot more fast notes. The second section was calmer, was, in a sense, it wasn't necessarily slower tempo-wise, but it had a different character. It had a calmer character, not so busy. Um, and then we also have the idea of a variation where I can use a tune as the basis for a musical composition. And then I repeat the tune for every section of my musical composition. However, what happens around the tune is different. So it's not a repeated 100% repetition of that tune. The tune serves as the basis for a variety of the sections that are followed. But we're going to talk about this idea in a little bit. So, featuring these three elements, repetition, contrast, and variation, we have a number of forms that we're going to talk about today. First of all, we have the strophic form, which is observed in pop songs and a lot of vocal music. And the strophic form is very simple. It has a chorus or a refrain, and it's followed by a verse. Okay? Think about your favorite pop song. That's the chorus is also called as the hook because that brings you, the listener, into, it grasps you. It brings it elicits your attention, and it's able to not let you go per se. And that hook repeats itself a lot. And then we have the verse, and that's the strophic form. Chorus, verse, so on and so forth. There's an example in your book at page, let me give you the correct number here, 60, about the strophic form, and it's pretty clear. It's a classic rock piece that some of you might know. Now the next form that we're talking about is the theme and variations. And the theme and variations features a number of sections of a piece that are called variations that are written on the same tune, which is called the theme. So what we have is we have a tune, okay? And that could be anything. And that tune represents the basis for which the whole piece is built. So that tune is going to be introduced at the very beginning. That's called the theme. And then it's going to be followed by a number of sections. Okay? And these sections are freestanding, which means that they could appear by themselves in a sense. They're like some shorter pieces, smaller pieces of music. But every section is going to be introduced. That tune will be introduced in the very section, and every section will be based on that tune in some way. What it means is that if you listen very carefully, you're going to hear the tune appearing in each one of those sections. And I have posted a video of Mozart's Twinkle Twinkle Star Variations, which is actually originally called Ah je vous dirai, Maman. And you will hear exactly, it's actually a piece that was written by Mozart based on the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and you will be able to hear exactly what the theme and variations is. Whenever you're listening to that, what you want to listen to is you want to listen to that specific tune that appears over and over again. So, next we have the idea of a binary form. The binary form happens when I have two sections of contrast. So, my piece is pretty much two sections. One of them has a type of character, another one has a different character. So, in this particular case, let's listen to an idea of a binary form. So that's the first section. Repeat it. Here's the second section. Okay? Now the difference between them is one of them was written in the major key, the first one. It had a happy character. The second section had a different character, more of a sad character. Listen to it again. So that's the happy one. Here's the sad one. Okay? So that's the difference. That's the idea of a binary form. Only two sections. A binary form is never going to have more than two sections in that particular piece. One of them, and they're both contrasting. One of them might be happy, the other one might be sad. One of them might be fast, the other one might be slow. Whichever. The ternary form is similar to the binary form. Ternary has to do with 3. And it's called ternary because it has 3 sections instead of 2. However, the idea is that the first sections will repeat itself and end the actual piece. So I'm going to play the piece that I've played before, but this time is going to be in a ternary form. Okay? Which means that the very first section will repeat at the end of the second section. So let's go back and try and play this again. So that's the A section, the happy. Here's the sad one. Now here's the first part again. And then my piece is over. So whenever I take the A section and put it back at the end of the piece, it means that I have a ternary form. And finally, the last form that we're going to talk about is the rondo form, which features a combination of a common section that happens more than once, which is called the refrain, kind of like it does in a strophic form. But instead of having a verse that sounds the same, it's actually featured a variety of different sections that are called the episodes.